Scotland's First Minister has defended new hate crime laws after J.K. Rowling spoke out against the legislation once again and challenged the police to arrest her. The Harry Potter author says the new laws are wide open to abuse, but the First Minister says they will help tackle the rising tide of hatred.
Scotland's new hate crime laws were expected to meet a backlash, and here it was on day one. Protesters gathered outside Holyrood, voicing concern with a bill they say stifles free speech and can be exploited by those looking to silence particular groups. Among those angered are the author J.K. Rowling. In a thread on X, formerly known as Twitter, she lists a number of high-profile controversies involving trans women before questioning their gender. Freedom of speech and belief are at the end in Scotland if the accurate description of biological sex is deemed criminal. I'm currently out of the country, but if what I've written here qualifies as an offence under the terms of the new Act, I look forward to being arrested when I return to the birthplace of the Scottish Enlightenment. On a visit to a hospital, the First Minister defended the legislation which he says will help protect marginalised groups.
I'm very proud of the Hate Crime Act. Freedom of expression, for me, ensures that we've got a piece of legislation that will be enacted and implemented in a way that is absolutely balanced and make sure it absolutely protects people in their freedom of expression, but guards people from, as I say, that rising tide of hatred that we've seen far too often in our society.
This protest has been organised by a relatively fringe group, but those concerns go beyond the margins, provoking debate around not just free speech, but also how the police enforce this new law. Which is why Scotland's Police Federation are worried about its impact.
It is a recipe for disaster and it's a real concern. Every time a new law gets passed, that police officers then have to attend more and more calls. Now, we've got 1,000 less officers at the moment, so it is going to have an impact on policing.
After 3 years of debate, the Scottish Government wanted this to be a landmark piece of legislation, but instead, today could signal the start of even deeper division.
This is the Rebel Call Channel. Welcome to today's show. As we draw closer to 2030 and Agenda 2030, we're going to see more and more governments around the earth implement new laws that are going to tackle what they're calling hate crimes and hate speech. And of course, this is all to put a layer of protection between us and these people who are about to enslave humanity. Because again, hate speech doesn't have a real definition, but what they do is they convince the masses to go along with this because people's feelings are getting hurt, certain protected groups are getting hurt, and of course the government's really just lumping themselves in with the LGBT and these other groups and keeping themselves completely free from criticism, and those seem to be the only people who are protecting the government and standing as a wall between civilians rising up against rogue governments around the earth. So Scotland's government is saying that a new law will tackle hate crime. Critics say it could hurt free speech. And of course, this is beyond hate crime and free speech. We're literally talking about words coming out of someone's mouth without doing anything whatsoever, without even really saying something threatening to someone, which still should not be considered a crime, actually resulting in a maximum of a 7-year prison sentence. And it shouldn't surprise anybody at the face of what you just saw is J.K. Rowling, right? Because again, these people play both sides. That's why we're in the position we're currently in. They play both sides of the aisle. They play conservative, they play Democrat. They lure their audience, they lure the people who follow them, they manipulate them, and then we have stuff like this with J.K. Rowling, who will not face action under Scottish hate crime laws, but is warning people. Oh yeah, is J.K. Rowling really warning people? Is J.K. Rowling really against the trans movement? Well, of course J.K. Rowling is not against the trans movement. Now, J.K. Rowling, of course, is known for what? For all of the Harry Potter propaganda that has poisoned the minds of the youth out there and indoctrinated them with witchcraft. So for anybody that thinks that J.K. Rowling is against the trans movement, you're out of your mind. J.K. Rowling is serving as a plant for the trans movement and, of course, is bringing about more of this censorship because of the things that J.K. Rowling is tweeting out. Now, well, I know for a fact, not just because J.K. Rowling is a witch, but because of that tattoo right on J.K. Rowling's wrist. You see what it says? It says, Salve Coagula, right? Salve et Coagula. Do you know what that means? Do you know where that's from? That's tattooed on J.K. Rowling's wrist. If you didn't know, that is also tattooed on the wrists of the Baphomet. Okay, do you think that's a coincidence that J.K. Rowling, who wrote these books, indoctrinating young children into accepting witchcraft, saying it's all make-believe, of course, book after book after book, maybe the greatest gateway into the occult that we have seen in modern history. There's Dungeons and Dragons, and then there's Harry Potter. And how many kids grew up on Harry Potter, and how many parents who grew up on Harry Potter are now indoctrinating their kids with it? A lot. Remember I covered some of the stuff? Were they even selling the Harry Potter magic wand that's reading spells out loud? I've covered that. That video is available on the website. That's right, they're even selling wands that are reading out spells, but it's all make-believe, right? So we're supposed to believe that J.K. Rowling, who really is only known for Harry Potter and some of her writings, and the other thing that she's known for is being an activist against the trans movement, right? Meanwhile, the thing tattooed on her wrist is tattooed on the wrist of the Baphomet, who is the face of really the trans movement, of what they're trying to accomplish. The Baphomet has breasts and a penis, right? The Baphomet is the transgender goat that they worship, that they're trying to normalize. So that's just enough proof, and should be enough proof for anybody out there to realize that these are all witches who are using mind control and sorcery on you to get these laws implemented. While you might say, well, why would J.K. Rowling be out there saying the things that she's saying? Well, why do you think some of the conservatives come out there like Donald Trump and pretend to tickle your ears? The things that they do ignite both sides. They have to play both sides in order to conquer both sides. Because if they were only playing one side and people were smart enough to see what they were doing, thus they would band together and rise up against this. So let's take a look at this new law against hate speech crime. The new law against hate speech came into force in Scotland on Monday, praised by some but criticized by others. Now, who in the world would praise this? Obviously somebody who's weak, who is beta, I guess they call him. Somebody who all of a sudden, again, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That whole motto is dead, right? There are people who literally take words as assault, and that's, of course, all done by design, that the government has implemented this mind control on the masses because they're trying to remove free speech so that people are no longer allowed to speak out against this tyrannical dictatorship of a global government that is now in place. And again, it's in place because of people like J.K. Rowling. It's in place because of people like Trump, all of them working together to do this. So some people criticize it while others say its sweeping provisions could criminalize religious views or tasteless jokes. Well, of course it's going to criminalize religious views. And of course, J.K. Rowling knows that because J.K. Rowling is an enemy of Christianity, even though there's still apparently some Christian parents out there that play Harry Potter for their kids and say people like me are just conspiracy nuts. And it's perfectly fine for your kid to put a broomstick between his legs and run around the house, chanting invocations, because it's just all fun and games for everybody, right? So the Hate Crime and Public Order Act makes it an offense to stir up hatred with threatening or abusive behavior on the basis of characteristics including age, disability, religion, sexual orientation, and transgender identity. Racial hatred was already banned under a law dating from 1986. Let's keep in mind, if you're looking at this, okay, and you're trying to say, well, how is the government going to use this towards their advantage? Well, first of all, they expand on what hate speech is and what can be included. And of course, the Democratic Party, which isn't really a party, which is really a communist party, has adopted the transgender and the LGBT communities as theirs. Thus, if you speak against that, you're speaking against that political party. And of course, those people in those communities, in those groups, will of course rise up against anyone that speaks against the political party that is supposedly protecting them. Okay? So the maximum sentence could be up to 7 years in prison. The legislation does not specifically ban hatred against women. The Scottish government says that will be tackled by a separate forthcoming law against misogyny. Scottish Minister for Victims and Community Safety, Brown, said the new law would help build safer communities that live free from hatred and prejudice, of course. Only people with the word suckers tattooed on their throats believe in this. We know that the impact on those on the receiving end of physical, verbal, or online attacks can be traumatic and life-changing. This legislation is an essential element of our wider approach to tackling that harm. So the next thing they'll do is start looking at specific books that have specific stories about a certain group of people who literally got torched, okay? Got torched because they were such an abomination to God, and they'll start considering that hate speech text. They will either try to remove that specific book, or they'll just remove that specific verse and chapters of those books, or just remove the books themselves. And of course, see, Christianity is not protected under religion anywhere. Not from religious exemption, nothing. Christianity is not protected. However, there is a certain group of people who in their books have a specific teaching about this whole adopting gender ideology, okay, and these certain Noahide laws. They have this certain belief that this stuff's okay, and if you question that specific group, of course, that is what they're trying to protect here as well. Because if you figure out that this New World Order goes through a certain group of people who adopted a certain piece of land, and then, of course, called themselves a certain group of people that they're not, AKA they claim to be and they're not, they're really fake and of the synagogue of Satan. Well, that group of people will always be completely protected. And when these laws are in place, you'll never, ever, ever be able to point out anything in those books again, even though we can't really do that nowadays, can we? So critics argue that the law will have a chilling effect on free speech, making people afraid to express their views. The legislation was passed by the Scottish Parliament almost 3 years ago and has been delayed by wrangling over its implementation. Veteran human rights activist Peter Tatchell said the law was well intended but vague. Of course it's vague. Hate speech and hate crime is vague. It's all open to interpretation and whatever's convenient for the people in power, right? Because can't anybody look at anything if somebody criticizes your hat, you could somehow lump that into hate speech, right? Because you could be like, well, that's hateful. And they'd be like, well, how is it hateful? It's just a hat. You're like, well, because I'm gay and I'm wearing this hat. So it's hate speech. Oh, right. Oh, somebody's fat. We can't call him fat. I mean, we're literally talking about people being afraid to talk. And that's what they want, ultimately. They want people afraid to express their views because they want to protect themselves from the views of people like me and you. They're not trying to protect other people who have sensitive feelings because they don't care about them. They're trying to protect themselves from the truth actually getting out. That's the one thing they fear. See, the truth getting out is all that big tech is trying to contain because big tech is involved in this. We're talking about protecting people who do the most disgusting, disturbing acts in darkness and secret being in charge of everything. We're talking about politics, corporations, okay? When people start figuring out and when they go down the rabbit hole and figure out who's really behind it, that's the certain group of people that you're not allowed to talk about. So anybody out there that's already protected that you can't talk about, you obviously should be more than suspicious of those people. But ultimately, when these laws continue to get passed, the people lose power to question the government. That's ultimately what this is about. It's about truth not only being contained, but you being punished for it. So you're so afraid to speak out against it that you have to, by force, conform to slavery. That's what it is. So J.K. Rowling is not out there protecting it. J.K. Rowling is out there with her tattoo and her worship of Baphomet, promoting it by pretending to be opposition to it. That's how more of these things get enforced. They control both sides. Hate speech and hate crime, the fact that conservatives even allow, in the United States of America specifically, allow this type of talk. And again, I talked about that last year with Christians and a lot of these events that were happening at schools, that, Christians were calling for hate crime. They were doing that by design. They want Christians to believe hate crimes are real and then to start using that type of thing, just like canceling each other out, right? I said conservatives should never call to cancel out liberals and vice versa. And to set an example by not calling for censorship. And what did they do? They started trying to cancel each other out. Done by design. Of course, this is what the global elites want. On the same side of it, they want conservatives and Christians to call for hate speech because they want them to suddenly just think that this is a real thing and not realize that these laws are in place to suppress truth. That's all they're in place to suppress, truth. I thank everybody for being here. Don't fall for cheap imitations and cheap fake stories like J.K. Rowling. All of it is put there by design. I thank you again. God bless all of you and your families.